Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this video we're going to be working on another drag and drop functionality. In the previous video in the previous tutorial I created a drag and drop for this where you can drag and drop from one list to the other, within one list to the other. So you can also do reordering. But in this video what will be the main thing we're going to be accomplishing is having to leave shadow when you drag. Like when you're dragging an item, there should be a shadow behind and a shadow in front when you try to drop it. So this is just every ordering functionality that we're doing. So we are going to build this and quickly implement the drop shadow behind. So guys, if you find this helpful, and if you think the previous tutorial was, if you think this looks nice, you can go ahead and watch the video. I'll add the link in the description below. But in this main tutorial, this is what we're going to be building. So I'm just going to close this. And so far, this is what we have. This is just a bare list without any drag and drop functionality added. So our task is to add drag and drop functionality and also add the shadow, the drop and drag shadows. So let's go ahead and work on that. Okay, to start, I already created our repository with all the codes, all the basic codes and all the basic styling for this. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through, and we can start setting up our drag and drop. So the first change here is making sure that my chakra UI provider has been connected well, and I also have my theme. I'm using the same theme from the previous video, so you can go ahead and check it out as well, how I managed to get this. I'm getting the font from Google Fonts, so this is the link for the Google font, and this is all for this file. And then for the this is the only page we have, which is that home page or index page, and we have the code for the column here, which is another component on its own, and we have our tasks. This is the list of all the tasks that we have within the list, within the column. Now a column, this is the simple structure, simple code for our column. By the time we add drag and drop our components, it will look bigger, and that will be all for the walkthrough. So guys, let's go ahead and install dependencies. We have React. Okay, so this is done installing. Let's set up our context for the drag and drop. So I'm going to import from React Beautiful DnD. And this context expects a few handlers. I'm going to define these functions shortly. So these three functions, we need to define them here. Start with the on drag in. I'm going to start from the end to the start. This end expects a result, and this result has the source and the destination. Same thing with the other two. Okay, we have this set up. Let's go into our column, and we are going to add the droppable. We're going to wrap our column with the list with the droppable and draggable for the task. So within our column, let's import. We're going to wrap this list here with the droppable component. This component expects an ID. I'm just going to call it column. Now it has its format. It's supposed to be in this form. Drop. Okay, we have a droppable provided there. Now let's spread the props here. Need to wrap our task with the draggable component, and this task should have a key task.id. Should have a draggable ID of task.id to string. Okay, it's supposed to be a string and task ID is a number, so making sure that it's converted to a string. I'm going to set index to that. Also, this also expects a draggable provided and a draggable snapshot. Now let's render this here. Let's spread the props. So we have draggable provided dot draggable props dot draggable handle props, draggable provided again dot draggable props, and it's ref as well. So this should be enough to have the drag functionality working. So it's not okay, it's working. So now we have a drag functionality, but it doesn't order the items, but at least we're able to drag. Let's add more styling to it. So within here, I'm going to give an outline, so solid, and an outline color. Now this color should be visible. This color should be visible if it's dragging. So what I'm doing here is, if it is dragging, give it card border. Now this card border comes from our theme, otherwise just makes it undefined. Next thing is a box shallow. Same thing here. It is dragging, otherwise unset. Okay, instead of undefined, let's just say transparent. Okay, now we have a box shadow and we have the border and dragging. Now let's get back into our index, and within our index, let's write the code for this on drag end and on drag start. So first, we have a few things. Check if there is no destination, so if the user didn't drop in new location, or like if a user drops in an unknown location, on location that if a user drops in a destination which is not within the droppable, it should just return null or void. Otherwise, if the destination so what this does is, if the user drags and drops back in the same destination, that means there was no change in the index position of both the source. It is no change in the index position of that task. It should just return void and do nothing. So let me just give a comment here. Now, this part is the user drops in a different position. I'm going to get the task. I'm going to get the task from the state, and I'm going to create a new task, reordered task, and we will have a normal function that does the reordering. Expects task, source index, and destination index. At the end, you have a new state. Now let's go and create this function. I'm just going to call it list. And then we're going to generate a new task list. new task. Going to generate it from the task. Splice. So what this line does is to it loops through this this array of tasks and removes the item from the array, removes an item from the array which is at the start position index, at the start index of our drag. So at the source, wherever the user is trying to drag, it will remove whichever item the user is going to drag. It will locate that item by its source index and remove the item. Now this function normally returns the removed item, so I'm just going to call it removed. And the next step down is to add it back to the list using the same splice function. Now this splice function has the possibility of adding and removing item from a list. So line 10 was removing one item from a list at position start index. Then line 11 is now adding an item back to the list, adding back the removed item to the list at line end index. Now this zero represents that we are not removing any item, and this value here says that this is the item we are adding to this list. So we will now return new task. So by default, splice alters the list, and we're able to just return it like this. So right now we should be able to have our drag and drop array ordering working. Okay, now our reordering works. Let's go ahead and add the drop shadow. Now a few things we need to do here. The drop shadow, I think the work required is quite much, but let's say we have a query. We need to get a query attribute from the DOM that comes with React Beautiful drag and drop. Now, so there is this, by default, there is this attribute. We will need it. We will use it to get the dragged element. So actually, this is the attribute on the dragged element. So I'm going to create a function called get dragged DOM. This function expects the draggable ID, and within the function we have the DOM query. So with this line I'm going to define our DOM query. I'm going to just assign a value for DOM query. Now with this is the attribute, and I'm setting it to draggable ID. Okay, so this is it here. I'm going to get that DOM element by this query and return the drag DOM. So this attribute is on the element you're dragging. So I'm using this function to access that element and return the element here, the dragged element within the DOM. Now inside, let's go to our on drag start. So within our on drag start, we don't need the destination here because it's never going to be available since you're starting. Let's get the draggable ID instead. And the next line is we will now get that DOM element returned, that is being returned from the get drag DOM function. And first let's check if it's defined. If it is not, return void. Secondly, let's get the height and width. Call it client height, client width, and let's get a source index. And then let's make another if statement to check if the parent node exists. If it doesn't, then void. This is certainly going to be the case. So the parent node for that item should exist, and it's most likely always going to exist. And lastly, this is where the main work is present. Let me just document what we will be doing here. So we have a few steps to follow. Okay, so this is the first thing we're going to do is take all the items, like get all the tasks within the list of array, within the list as an array, slice from the start to where we are dropping the dragged item destination index, reduce and fetch the style of each item. So we're getting the style for each of the items. Add up the margin and weights and paddings, accumulate and assign that to the client Y, which is the y-axis. So let's go ahead and do that. The client Y. So I'm going to parse float within the window object. I'll obtain use get computed style to get the draggable DOM parent node styles, and from it I'll obtain the padding top, and then I'm going to loop to the parent node's children with the slice function, and pick the first child within the list. And so we are slicing, so I am like slicing, so moving it upward as I go down. See where, so this is just to keep the space, mostly make sure that the space is there, and then reduce, get the total of the curve. Now within reduce, let's obtain the style from current style. If it is not there, type window get computed and get the current. Next we need the margin bottom, pass float again, style dot margin bottom. Now let's return the sum of the total, the current that client height plus the margin bottom. So this gives us our client's Y space. Next is we need a state for the properties, for the provider's properties. Use state. Down. Okay, now that we have this, let's pass the placeholder props as a prop to this column component, and within the column component we're expecting the placeholder props. Then down here, this is where we needed to do so we are just going to using load dashes is empty. I'm going to check if placeholder prop is empty. I will render this. Let's style placeholder. Position obsolete. It's going to be position obsolete. And then I'm going to give it the top of placeholder props, and I'm going to get the client Y. Then next is, let's give it rounded 30 pixels, opacity 0.6, border width to border style dashed, border color current border, and what next? Let's give it height. Height in this case is going to be the client height from the placeholder, and it's in pixels. Width, though this is not necessary, but we just have to give it the same, assign it the same way we did with the height. Now let's see what we have here. Sorry, this is supposed to be placeholder props. Now let's see. Okay, we needed to give an initial value to the reduce function. Okay, so we now have our drag shadow. So this is our drag shadow. Let's add the drop shadow. Now, to make sure that the drop shadow is added, the code for that we're going to add the code for that within the onDrag update function. So within the onDrag update function, we're going to do a few checks. First check is the destination available? If it is not defined, return void. Now let's get the drag DOM using the get drag DOM function. Let's extract the draggable ID. Make sure that this is common from our result as well. And I'm going to do the check for that. Okay. And after that, just like we did with the, similar to what we did with the drag start, let's get the client height and the client width from the drag DOM parent. I'll just drag them. Get the destination index from the destination index source. Okay, let's get the array of children, and this is gotten by, let's check if the parent node has any children. If the parent node has children, let's get them by the drag DOM parent node children. Otherwise, we just return an empty array. We just assign an empty array for that array to that parent. Next is, let's get the moved item source index, and let's remove it from the list. Next, let's update the array with children, adding by we're getting the item at 0 index, and this is the delete count, so the start index is 0, the delete count is destination index. So we are removing the item, and we are adding this moved item. Then we are spreading children array splice. Yeah, we're just spreading. We're just spreading what's left. So let's spread what is left from the destination index, from the item which is at the destination index to the end of the array. Now let's use a parse for float again. Window, the same thing. Adding top again. The same thing here. Okay, in this case, destination index represents the number of items we want to delete from the start. So we are removing every item from the start till the destination index. And within our function, style. Okay, the same thing. Just going to copy what we have here and paste. Alright, this should give us the behavior we want to see. Okay, we need to give an empty, we need to give a start index, a start value for the initial value. Alright guys, this is now functional. Okay guys, this is the end of the video, and we've been able to accomplish just what we planned on doing. So I'm going to keep the link. I'm just going to fine tune this and leave the link in the description of the video. So this was good, and you can clone the repository and have a look at it. So thank you for watching, and thank you for watching my video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and